So just give me like 1 second. I'm just like finishing making up something, but I have a. You may disagree with. Oh shit! I didn't mean to do that. Can you hear me, Freddie? Freddie, thumbs up if
I
you
can
can hear
hear you
me, or
now.
say. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean it's like I kind of have like this. Yeah, I kind of have like this like just like being on like Twitter Spaces for the last like few months. Like I kind of think that like the gross exaggeration of kind of where America is and how people feel about the country uh, is very exaggerated on both sides. And I find that people on the right, they want to like the grass is greener. They look historically and say it's better, which there are aspects of America that are definitely better historically. And then if you look at like other people, like far leftists, they look at other countries, like the colonizer stuff, like they act like colonization is a net negative, although there's atrocities that happened. They look at it as like a net negative. Negative, in other words, like all cultures are equal. Thus, in, thus previous cultures or other cultures are superior. Having disdain for whatever American culture is, so I don't know. I mean, you may disagree with me, Freddie, but that's kind of like my overall thoughts.
Like, okay, yeah, I know you're saying like the people that are like pro Russia and stuff, and they live in the U.S., like those types of
Well, I
people.
mean, that's just a specific example. I mean, yeah, you could say that that's one aspect of it. Pro-Russian people, people that they, and there's like a whole other concept too. In other words, like we have like there's an advantage of having like relative free speech because I know we don't have the most free speech, but we do compared to most countries. And having free opposition and all these other things is that we see like the warts, the stuff that are issues within our country, at least in the discourse. And then when we view other countries that have much more of a controlled media, we see kind of what is projected and what is seen. So I think that's another huge aspect as well. Like there's advantages and disadvantages, and we're seeing, it's you kind of see the results of it, right?
Yeah, I see. I know what you're saying. Like the people that exaggerate how bad the situation is in the U.S. opposed to like other Western countries. Yeah, I mean that's kind of weird. Like there was that video recently that went kind of viral of like some Europeans being like life in America, and they like showed a bunch of stuff that was pretty awesome here. Um, and that's to some level is kind of true though, because like Europe, for example, is kind of falling apart economically. They can't support the migrants they brought in, and they have a lot of other issues, financially speaking. So like it. I think people have this idea that it's so awesome everywhere else in the world, but it's not always the case. And that's true. But we have a lot of things we need to work on in the U.S. for sure. I think that need to be changed sooner or later, else we're gonna get really fucked over.
Yeah, I agree on that. It's not to say that America's perfect, and I'm not one that's like this and that America. Like, I love this country. I'm like, and I've traveled to other countries, as I'm sure some other people here have. And the way that they talk about other countries is that they view they romanticize it because they haven't saw like you go to another country on vacation and you're enjoying it. You don't have like the stresses of life, the stresses of taking out a mortgage, the stresses of having to deal with the healthcare system. And these are all stuff that are difficult over here, those issues specifically. But having context of that matters, I guess. And I just, it's been a little frustrating, I think, with conversations and spaces, kind of with just like overall attitudes and things like that. I mean, Zuki, do you think I'm on point, or do you think I'm, you know, being a
Oh
little?
no, I mean in terms of like, sorry if I'm echoing, I'm in my car. But in terms of if it's really bad, like in terms of like life in America compared to anywhere else, I can't really speak for most other places. Just that it's I mean, I live in LA, so it's like that place where like that video was shared. They're just like showing the nice parts of LA and stuff like that. And actually, most of LA is still all right. It's not. I'm not living in the third world. Um, it's just that there are times where just like really awful crime like randomly happens, and trying to get the police involved, trying to do something about it, so it's just so stupid. I mean, it's just weird. It's just like this place is like this place can be paradise, but it's not. There's like you just kind of see the shit underneath. You just like lift the rock up, and you're like, oh, what the hell's going on here? And then but again, these are problems that I think people are just refusing to fix. That I think that can be quickly fixed, but they just don't want it to be, or either they're just going. They just have it well themselves. They don't want to. They don't care to bother, and the people who want to bother everyone else to kind of keep the conditions in, um, they're much more numerous. They're much more insane. They're much more fervent in their belief. So
Well, so what do you so okay, so as far as like like inner city crime, like I know New York far better than LA, and because I've been in I've been in New York recently, and I've family go to New York that frequently, and I personally I feel like that the issues in New York are exaggerated with the media. Now, having said that, I would say that there's some issues that spill over into the you could say shared spaces. In other words, um, I guess the nice areas, I'd say, not the, specifically to the bad areas. So I've heard this argument that the crime statistics are much lower, obviously, than like the 80s or the 70s. But people say that the difference is what is it, the randomness of it, just kind of the uncertainty people have. Um, or people are just were much more used to violence back in the day. Obviously, not maybe gun violence per se, but stabbings and fist fights. And if they see something happen like on a subway, it's kind of shocking to them because for so long in New York, it was like policed properly.
yeah. It's definitely there that it can be policed properly, or rather draconianly. It's like funny because this recent thing happened where the Chinese, where like, Chairman Z came to visit America to China, like and of course he visits San Francisco, and like, I mean, they had the cops just, go Judge Dredd on the vagrants, all the homelessness that was going on in the streets, just cleaned it up. Apparently, that's what they did, and just, you know, um, and then people got really like fed up and angry about it. It's like, why weren't you guys doing this kind of stuff before he came through town? You're literally just like doing like, just like have like some demonstration of like how well you can manage things in the city. For the chairman of China, like the head of state of China, to come in, just like for a few days, and then just let the junkies kind of roll right back through. It's just kind of, you know, the ability's there, but like I guess the politics like within the system, they don't want to do anything about it long term wise or something like that. I don't know. But it's like, if you really want to get cops to like bring down a hammer, like they're able to do it. People are able to do it. But like
Yeah,
the
you have to have the willpower. You have to have the backing of the government behind you. Having the ability is one thing, or having the willpower or desire to do it is the other thing. But Rob, what is it? Robot Devil. Your thoughts on this topic? Like I guess in other words, I think that a lot of Democrats, I guess leftists, liberals, they look to other countries as like superior as far as culture, and I think that a lot of rep- people on the right look purely in historical sense. So in other words, grass is greener externally, and then I think a lot of people on the right romanticize the past in ways in which are incomplete. Right? Your thoughts, Robot? Anyways, I think I think this all to me that this a lot of this like is related to like social media, the internet, and things of that nature. The same way that we talk about this sometimes, how like women are like, I think filters are worse, specifically, which the effect on society than pornography, because it affects everybody. Obviously, we could argue how bad pornography is, and it is, but I think people look at things through filters, whether it be, somebody posting about going to another country, whether it be somebody showing pictures about the better times, there's like
Are
this
you talking about
discussion.
the people that are like the all women are better outside of America kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's
Oh, you got tuned out. Boxing, you're out. Yeah. Can you talk again?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can
Yeah.
hear you now.
Yeah. So
I
yeah,
can.
I mean, there's a degree of like, yeah, like, yeah, go to Romania to find a more beautiful woman, but there's a reason why these women are trying to come to America, and the opportunity, the infrastructure, the roads, just the comfort, I think, is something we take for granted, and maybe it's caused, maybe too much comfort's caused such unhappiness over here.
The like the whole passport bro thing. I think I talked about this in Spaces a while ago. Like, I don't know. All these guys seem to want to go to like sketchy countries. Like they never go to countries where um these women are like, because what they essentially want is like a more attractive wife who's like feminine and does woman stuff. Like I understand that appeal, but if you can't get that in your own country and you're not like that awesome of a dude, like it's actually more competitive in some other countries. It like I'm not talking like the Philippines or Brazil or like all the sketchy ones that guys try to go to like get like a passport bro type wife deal. That shit's sketchy and I wouldn't recommend that. But if you wanted to like date a feminine woman, like a really attractive feminine woman from like a different country, go to like Western Europe,
Yeah,
you
but the
know?
competition, like you said, yeah, the competition's equal there. That's always been the thing. That's always been the
It's
case.
not
Like,
really equal there though. Like the thing is, the Europeans definitely like Americans a lot. Like they say they don't, but I know so many American men who've married like German and French women. Like just in my town, I know I can think of like 6 or 7 off the top of my head, of like
yeah.
half European, half like American.
I don't think that's the idea behind the passport bro though. Like I think the
No, it's
idea
not. I agree. That's what I'm
What,
saying.
what,
Like
what,
their idea is like let's go to the Philippines, let's go to Brazil and like you can get like all the pussy in the world because there's
I
like
don't even think
women.
that's the point. I don't think pussy's the point. I think the point behind the passport bro is that an American woman is typically not going to be like a traditional wife. That seems to be the problem. So you're not going to have an Americanized woman's going to be like career first and maybe not kids and isn't going to like cook and clean and do these things. So you're seeing an influx of men who are going to more traditional style countries where women have more traditional roles and then finding a woman who is going to live those traditional roles as a wife as opposed to maybe like an American woman.
but
Yeah,
but Dre,
that's
but Dre,
part of it too.
but Dre, don't you think that, you know I'm I'm not old, but I feel like I'm old, but it's always been the case where a guy, let's just say he brings a woman from another country. Typically speaking, you see a guy who's like, and this is not always the case, but it's often a guy who's maybe, a 4 or 5, and he'll get like an 8 or 9 from a different country.
Well, yeah,
Because
because then you're also going to see, I mean, that definitely is going to be part of the case because they're going to have more options because Americans are perceived to have more money too. So, depending on where they're at, their money's going a long farther way. It's the same thing as if I go on a vacation into a country that if I vacation here where I live in my own hometown, I get squat because it's crazy expensive in California. Now, if I go to Punta Cana and I go to the DR, I can live like a queen for a month off of like a 2-week paycheck. So, and I mean like a legit queen with like servants and all my food and all my things in like a castle. So I mean, yeah, I mean basically it sounds kind of shitty, but your money goes a little bit farther in those other countries too. But I think that the problem is like here in America on that end, men would probably settle for a less attractive woman who would play a more traditional role if that was available here, as opposed to like going even overseas and through all that work to find that part. It's just that we've essentially kind of eradicated the traditional role for women in America. And it's starting with to, see a little kick back into our culture, but how that's going to take place or if it's going to have a foothold is left to be seen. Because as of right now, to me, it just seems like a trend.
But
I agree with you there. Can I respond to that, boxing?
oh yeah, go ahead, Freddie. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that like the whole trad like movement and stuff, it's like a very tiny internet trend. I don't really have a lot of hope for that because I don't think you can get like numbers of couples that are like traditional where the husband's working and the wife's staying home with the kids in 2023. Like it's just not really financially possible for most people unless they
That's the other side of it, is
serious
that you're
sacrifice.
right. Yeah, the other side of it is you could have someone who would really love to be in that traditional role. Like I would just be so happy if I could just be a housewife and make a beautiful home and bake bread and look cute all day. That would be my dream. But that's just not possible because it's not possible to not have a dual income in places like California and then
Yeah.
also, be able to send your child to a school that's not going to just indoctrinate them with garbage.
Well,
I
it's pretty
would
much
say
it's anywhere.
my
It's not just
response to
California.
that, because my mother was a stay-at-home mom, like sacrifices need to be made. Like we were not a rich family, you know. Like my father was the only person working, so the belt was tight when it came to a lot of stuff. Like we didn't go on like vacations very often, or like didn't really do a ton of like super like fun things that a lot of families get to do, which is not bad. Like we had fun at home, we did like stuff around here, but there's sacrifices that need to be made. Like I think there's going to have to be a trade-off whether both of you are working, which I think is terrible. I think the woman should have the at least the option to stay home if she wants to. Um, or the husband's going to have to find a different career where he can make more money or work twice as hard. Which there's different ways to make money, like different hustles you can do, or you're gonna have to sacrifice your standard of living a certain amount, which is like most realistic, unfortunately. And I think like California, it sucks because it's just super super expensive. It's probably the most expensive area in the country besides like New York, like New York City.
It's more expensive. It
Than New
actually
York
is more
City.
expensive. Yeah, so I looked at it's different because I looked at and given this was a very expensive area. I think it was like Palo Alto or Los Altos, whatever that area right there, kind of the Silicon Valley area, which is beautiful. My brother lived out there for a small period of time, but I was like, all right, beautiful. Let me look at like when you go to like downtown and the shops and then they have the the houses on the real estate on the window. So I could understand like a New York City apartments. I understood how much they were, $3 million for whatever. But out there, right? So you don't have the convenience of like a New York City. In other words, you can't take the public, you can't take the subway. You don't have like shops and restaurants. You have to get in a car. So you're not living city convenience. Like these fucking ranch style houses, a house that like where I grew up in a like really nice area in Orlando area in Winter Park would be maybe like $700,000. These houses were 2.4, $2.7 million. They were like modest houses. And I'm like, how the fuck am I gonna live out here?
That's
Even
that's
on a
almost
doctor's salary.
Massachusetts now. That's why I can't really live here anymore. Like not $2 million, but definitely over a million. Like ranches, I've seen ranches go unbelievable amount of money
Yeah.
in
But
mass,
but but
and
Freddie, over a
it
million,
sucks here.
it
It's like there's no public transportation at all here, and our roads are terrible, and it's just gross weather. So there's like no benefit.
Yeah. So, but even here's the thing. Even you're right. But like over the like yeah, over $1 million is a lot of money. But just the spike in houses I saw, and also I don't even know how the like at least in Massachusetts the public schools are good. I don't even know if in
That's not
California.
true.
I know the
I've been
liberal.
through mass public education. It's not good. It's very overrated. They claim it's the best in the country, but it's not. It's definitely not.
I feel you.
What? I mean, I just want to say, well, you might have thought public education was stupid, but just got to realize there are levels to this. So, like, Yeah, you might have thought it was really bad, but it might have been like really good to somebody who grew up in like the LA public
Sure.
school system. And
Yeah, but
I don't
think
know
about
if
this
I
too,
can't.
Dookie. Like, so many of my classmates couldn't do like a certain level of math that be proficient, or like read to a proficient level, or write to a proficient level. Like, it was very embarrassing. Like, so many people failed just like the standardized testing and had to like redo it. It was like actually bad. I did go to trade school, so it was a different group of people, but even in the regular public school, that was also the case.
Yeah,
Uh,
listen, education's a complicated issue, but I was making a generalization comparatively to like Los Angeles schools. And the problem with like
yeah,
California is you spend all these taxes and at least like you expect to have some degree of like I guess social net, or like with your schools, roads, education, policing, those type of things. Like you pay higher taxes to have a better quality of life. Virginia has relatively high taxes actually for like kind of a blue state, but we do have decent infrastructure here. And I'm not like against taxes in that sense, because you you pay more money to live in certain areas, but to spend all those money on taxes and have shitty education, and then try to you know factor in having to send your kid to a private high school is insane. That is the insane aspect of it. And I don't know, like I've always thought public school, like you go to a good public school, you get a good public education. I know that's changed a little bit, but that's always been my mindset. You move to a nice area, you go to a good public school, and it's flawed, but I don't know.
I have no idea what like how. So like I haven't been in like high school for over 10 years. I have no idea how bad it's changed, or like in terms of like any of that. And also plus I like the people that went through it, they don't really have a reference either. It's not like they really knew how it was like when I went through it. So it's like, but now people are just saying like kind of like on this side of right wing Twitter, it's like it doesn't matter. You're just born with this IQ, like whatever, you'll do okay. You're just born with a high IQ, and you'll do fine. You'll just learn everything on YouTube. And I was like, yeah, maybe that's true, but I don't know. You still need like some parental investment in you uh, to try. Most of the time, you really do need like a mom in the home to teach you like basic stuff, which that's what I did. Like, well, that's what happened with me with my mother. She stayed at home and taught me and my brother out the alphabet, the multiplication multiplication tables. Can't pronounce that word. And yeah, just that's just gonna be like some basic stuff like that. But I'm hearing, I'm being told like this stuff is like kids are entering like seventh grade or something. Not being able to read at the third grade level, or it's like not being able to do really basic arithmetic math at like by the age of 13. It's really scary stuff. Although I'm just kind of wondering, like, where are the parents to kind of sit them down and teach them like these
Well,
basic things.
don't you think it's there's I think this is the thing that I've seen, and I'm not an expert at this, but I've just seen it just based on people that I know and my experiences, is that the smart kids in this country, the kids that are successful, motivated, have good families, are doing well, right? At the up into the university level. But I think that the people who don't have like, there's no structure for the lower performing kids to do better. And I think that maybe rethinking how we manage kids that are incapable or don't have the abilities to perform at a certain level would be a better solution, because opportunity for upper education, magnet schools, things like that are there if you're motivated, especially if you live like in a more of like an urban setting, a city setting. Um, so I think that the mean is brought down by extremely low performing students. But I think if you look at the median, I don't think it's as bad, if that makes sense to you.
I actually like I kind of actually really bad because it's really like the higher IQ people that have good temperaments and stuff. They end up getting married, and they would have like a number of kids, and by although they would like marry later, and then it's like people of Well, maybe. Yeah, maybe they're just seem medium to me. So yeah. Um, so it's just kind of
I
a
mean,
weird
Drea, do you have any like? Do you have any like, kids or family that have like that are in school right now? Do you think it's like that much different than when you were in school? I mean, or do you think that's the media kind of like, you
No, I
know?
do. I think it's that much different. I mean, it's going to be that much different because we have different technology. Like, we didn't use laptops when I was in school, right? We had computer lab. Then you went to the room with the big, huge computers that looked like they're from the dinosaur age, and we played like Oregon Trail and learned home row, right? Now you see kids with their Chromebooks in the classroom. So you just have, it's going to always be different. And I don't remember ever, ever really touching a whole lot of social, cultural aspects. Nothing like that was particularly like important. Was reading, writing, and arithmetic. And when 9/11 happened, I was a freshman in high school. And the response, in like, I live in a really small little mountain town near Yosemite, and the whole school basically like the whole school surrounded like each other with like kindness and was very patriotic. And every teacher, everybody was watching the news, everybody was on top of things, and they took the time to kind of explain what was happening. And it wasn't in a way that I feel like would happen today. I made a very serious decision, and I put my child in a private Christian school, and I work extra hours in order to be able to afford that. And whether or not, and I have in his school, there are people who are actually, maybe they're agnostic or nihilist atheists, but they appreciate what religion brings to communities, and kind of the structure that religion and morality that religion will place in society. So their children are there too. And I think that that's a major difference in uh, not just like how things were back when I was little, but I don't think it was like such a requirement and a need. Like, I went to a public school. I used to think like people who would say, oh, private school is the best. I'd be like, I went to public school and I'm not an idiot and I turned out just fine. And everyone I know went to public school and they turned out great. Well, here I am now, and I feel a little bit hypocritical because I toured 3 or 4 of our public schools, and there was never a doubt that I was gonna put
Well,
time in
let me
private.
ask you a question. What did COVID in itself make you make that change? Because there's a lot of people in my area that financially they were like not going to take that risk. But when the schools closed down and the private schools opened up, they're like, fuck it, like I'm going to have to make some financial sacrifices to get my kid to go to school because
It
that
was
wasn't
one
an
of the
option.
questions, that I asked during our interview. I did ask about COVID, and I asked about being vaccinated because um, I would have probably homeschooled my child if vaccinations were gonna end up being a requirement. That was something I
Uh, that's what I was asking. I was asking you the schools that were closed in itself. The vaccine's a whole different argument, which I
yeah.
don't want to get into. But
But it was one of the things that it was one of the bullet points that I was looking for. It wasn't the biggest bullet point. The biggest bullet point for me, and I have my degree in psychology. I have a minor in cognitive neuroscience, and my specialty is more forensic based. But I worked for a long time in applied behavioral analysis with kids, and sometimes in particular with autistic kids. So there's some things that I saw happening with in schools that I felt were really really wrong at certain developmental ages. And one of those things that I felt very strongly about was gender ideology in schools. And I tell people all the time, like, I would hear about the gender ideology issues in other states or whatever, and I just thought, oh, I thought it was like a very like right wing like fear mongering. is what I thought. I just thought it was kind of a blown up fear mongering thing. Mind you, at this point, I didn't really have. My son just turned 5, so he's in kindergarten now. So I didn't really have any like dog in the fight because I didn't see it. It wasn't at my doorstep, right? So in my mind, I thought this was like something that the Republicans were like, kind of like a niche corner. And then I thought, well, I'm in California. It's probably like an LA thing, and it's probably being blown out of proportion. And then when it came time to uh, go and tour schools, and my friend was like, "Oh, did you see they have like the gay BCs And I went, "No, they don't. There's no way." And then they do. They have the gay BCs in the kindergarten classroom, and
You're saying it's like being like it's taught. It's not just like a little thing. It's being taught in class. You're saying specifically.
right. Well, and here's because, like, first of all, he made this joke. He was like, "Yeah, A is for anal," and I'm like, "Oh my god, is that true?" And then, of course, it's not. Like, I was like, "You're such a jerk. You had
Yeah,
me."
it's just. I assume these things are more like adjectives for like acceptance and things of
You
that
would think
nature.
so, but like the
Yeah, yeah.
first one would be like A is for awesome and all that you are, and you're like, "Oh, okay." But then you have like B is for bisexual, and I is for intersex, and Z is for Z, Zim, Zer, and all these things. And then so I'm sitting there going, you can't explain intersex without explaining sexuality, without explaining sex.
Yeah.
And
So
there's a
let me just. I'll tell you a quick story, and I kind of want to get back to like specifically what I was talking about, but I guess just finish up really quickly because that's a whole the school things. We could go deep with that, too. But I'm sorry. Just go ahead and.
But that was basically my point, is that for me, that hit was my main thing, because you can't explain these topics without explaining other topics. Because if I tell like my niece, and there's a video that goes around that's like a really good, it's like a joke video, but it makes the point, is it's like, if someone's like, "What's a lesbian?" and you're like, "Well, it's like, if you're a girl but you like girls." And it's like, "I like girls. Am I a lesbian?" And like, kids don't understand these things because they're not sexualized human beings at this point, right? So more and more I looked into schools, um, there were things like that were coming up that I just felt were incredibly inappropriate. And it was something like I asked my mom, I'm like, "Is this something that you had to think about when, looking for schools for me?" She's like, "Absolutely not. It was never, ever an issue." She's like, "It never crossed my mind when you were little that I had to tell people, like, hey, it's not necessary for you to talk about bisexuality with my kindergartner or my third grader." She's like, "That was not done." And it was almost like an obvious, common sense, understood thing. So
Right.
I think now, yeah, that is a huge difference. It's something that parents have to actually be concerned about, because whether or not we like to admit it or not, schools are indoctrination centers where you learn other things, right? You learn all the math and stuff, but you are indoctrinated in one way or another. And I mean, that's how they started out. I believe it was like
Yeah, no,
schools
I understand
basically.
it, but let me just tell you like a quick little little like kind of anecdote of that kind of where I'm coming from. So I remember like I came back, I was like I don't know, second maybe a little bit before first grade. Somebody brought up like gay, and they're like so, and I go, "Mom, what's gay? Like what it's like to be gay?" And she goes, "It's when you prefer the company of a man over a woman." So I go to my mom. I'm like, "Well, I may be gay. Don't clip that. Because I prefer the company of boys over girls." But I was, a young boy, and she goes, "No, when you're young, you'll understand. When you get older, that's different." Which is obviously a normal thing for boys to prefer to hang around boys than girls. If it was the other way around, you may have a higher chance to be gay. But the point I'm making is that um, I didn't feel that there was any degree of indoctrination on any type of education when I was younger. It was apolitical, and a lot of the values and structure I got were either from my parents, from religious institutions, and whatnot. So I guess the big shift is something that I'm a little surprised of. Again,
Well,
I
I
don't have
think the
children.
shift is bigger, but like we used to think of it this way. At least when I was little, like everyone said the Pledge of Allegiance. You said the Pledge of Allegiance. We had, when you had an assembly, you said the Pledge of Allegiance. I remember being little and we sang like all these very, like, not just the national anthem, but like all these very like pro America songs. And in particular, like we did a lot during 4th of July. And this might just be remind you again, I lived in a small little mountain town near Yosemite, which so it might have been mostly, you know, Republican in general. But these small things like that, I feel like those are important for one, instilling patriotism into a generation and appreciation for the country. And I think these smaller steps like that we've basically removed um, have made a big impact. And it's also like one tiny thing at a time. It's right. It's not like they're going to come in with a wrecking ball and be like, we've completely demolished this form of like indoctrination where it's very pro-America and American first ideology. It's going to be one tiny brick or one tiny pebble and rock at a time where they chip away at this American ideology and pro-American ideology and then replace it with a, my truth, your truth, their truth, but not the truth type of
Right. Like I
ideology.
understand, yeah, that I agree with. Like in other words, I think people should be well educated in world affairs, other cultures, and whatnot. But there's nothing wrong with kind of, slanting your teachings. to- I guess, like
No,
America's
because that
bad.
shows like
In other words, favoring American discourse, favoring American culture in a way that doesn't seem disparaging of other cultures to young kids. Because I don't think young kids should be able to. I don't like. I really find it cringy when young kids are really politically active. In other words, like you should be growing up, learning like kind
right.
of how to play sports, how to interact with kids, and the indoctrination I see from. And I always get, a lot of Republicans get angry at me when I push back on when I see, oh, this kid, he's a young man and he knows that Donald Trump's not good for him. Like when I was younger, I could give a shit less about this. Like I was always like, I guess you could say lean to the right, but like I was more interested in other things. And I think that you develop your political understandings through life experiences and obviously education. And I
Right.
just I don't know. I find that very people are hyper. You know, I guess it's done on the left and it's also done on the right. But Zach, let me just ask you a quick question. My overall view about kind of like this space is like how I view that people on the left, they view other countries through like almost like a filter in which they pick out, like you see like this like colonizer thing. They pick out things about other cultures through like vacation lens rather than like physical lens. In other words, if you're in like let's just say I don't know, El Salvador, and you're on a wonderful vacation. They haven't had to experience getting a mortgage there, all these other things. And whereas Republicans, I think, view his history through a lens as well. In other words, they pick certain things out that were better in American history, and they don't contextualize it with modern, I guess, comforts and things like that. Right? Is that a fair assessment, kind of what you see, or am I kind of being a little dramatic?
Well, possibly, but we have to remember too that a lot of conservatives are like, well, them Muslims, and sort of an intolerance of the other. There that exists. I think that's existing more and more so on both sides of the spectrum. And it's kind of becoming a concern because there's a lot of hate, and like I think there's like academic hate more so on the left, like with the politics and the positions and the policies. And on the right, it's hatred of like, the other. Like, well, they're not Christian. Well, they're not white. Well, they have a strange culture. Well, they live in a strange
I
place.
don't find that to be true though. I
Well,
find
like, what kind of conservatives are you interacting with then? Because there's lots of people that are not on the political, that aren't like that politically oriented, but would skew conservative. They're like, well, I mean, like, I would never go to the Middle East. That's
probably
a
the
backward place,
constitutional conservatists who believe in your freedom to religion and your freedoms like that, because as long as it's not impeding on somebody else's, right? And probably converting with like actual Christians, because Christianity, while it's our job to missionary and try to bring people into our faith, it's also not our job to be cruel about it. So my guess would be Christians and actual conservatives, because there's this problem with people on the left or independents who villainize Christians and villainize people who are conservatives and are willing to have a lot of patience and are willing to have a lot of understanding for other religions or other faiths and cultures, but have a very interesting way of drawing a hard line when it comes to Christianity and conservatism. Because the other thing is, I don't know too many people who will openly and willingly like bash a Muslim or their religion, but have no problem doing it with the Christian. And I face that every day in my job. My chief medical officer is a Muslim man who stops and prays like 5 times a day. And he can have that. I, on the other hand, was told I can't have a Christmas party because not everyone celebrates in the same way. To which my answer to that is, but then I'm being discriminated against because Christmas is a Christian holiday and I'm not allowed to put up my little office Christmas tree or say Merry Christmas. I have to say Happy Holidays so as not to offend anyone. So people are perfectly fine offending Christians because, we'll just turn the other cheek. And yet, let's get up in arms if we say anything about or judge any other religions, because then you're just being a judgmental non-Christian being bad at it. So I think that, let's kind of remember it's interesting to see what we are allowed, who we are allowed to judge, and who we are allowed to kind of basically treat like crap when it comes to freedom of religion.
I mean, you have to admit, though, I'm old enough to remember after 9/11, like things were different then. Like I was a kid, a very young kid, but the Muslim bashing was significant. And and I will say this, that you know I was young and I was like, I thought, I'm like, well, why aren't there more terrorist attacks? Because the way that I thought, and yes, the U.S. government does thwart certain amounts of terrorist attacks, but I'm like, it should be way more widespread based on the rhetoric in which I was taught. And this is a fair assessment, being young and being kind of, understanding. Yes, 9/11 was horrific. The scale of it was massive. Like um, my cousin worked in the building, kind of like right next to it. And like, it was like really close to it. My whole family grew up in New York, but it's close to, it's close to me, but just kind of the fear in general. I'm always surprised. I'm like, why aren't there more? And is that, Dre, are you old enough to kind of remember that feeling, that the feeling in which you expected a lot more to happen and it didn't? And yes, the US government did stop obviously some attacks, but like that's not the only reason why. It maybe didn't, it wasn't as widespread as we believed it was going to happen.
I mean, I remember being afraid and thinking something else was going to happen and thinking that something might happen in California because we had some bigger cities and then I also do remember like kind of that, being like afraid, like, oh my gosh, is, that Muslim, um, like I guess Islamophobia style but also I feel like just like COVID, where we saw there was a rise in people being hateful towards like basically like any Asian person. I think what's sad is that it's not that I'm excusing the behavior, but it is like human behavior, in particular like mob behavior, to overgeneralize ethnicities, races, and religions. And then when something bad happens, villainize it, right? We see that with like Catholicism. We saw that with the COVID and Asian ethnicities. We saw that with Islamophobia after 9/11. And that's where we have to take the personal responsibility within our families, within our communities, and then hold our educators accountable for teaching and being informative. And when I was in school, like we did have a teacher who was a Sikh. So it was, I feel like it was kind of like our town was mostly like Caucasian people. It was, again, a very small town. And so we had like our one guy who kind of looked like the guys on TV and who, all these people are looking at him like, explain to us what's happening. And if Croaky was in here, he'd be like, that's like your one token black guy who can explain to all the white people like what's really happening in the world. But it was beneficial, even though I'm like making a joke, it was beneficial so that you understand like the different cultures within within the Middle East, and give people a better understanding of what's happening. And I think, and we saw like after 9/11 and like after like with COVID, we didn't see a lot of transparency from our government. We didn't see a lot of willingness to like in our education systems to really educate anybody on almost any other cultures. We basically used fear mongering and then guilt again, right? It was like, be afraid of these people, but also you're a bad person if you're afraid of these people, because we
But
do like this Streisand effect
isn't it
of it.
relative though? Kind of like, this is the thing that people don't realize, because in certain states it was pretty hard, COVID restrictions and whatnot. In certain states it wasn't. But isn't it relative? In other words, we don't understand how hard it was to live in other countries, even like Australia, for example, like other like, Western countries that we could relate to in a lot of ways, right? Um, the government control in that sense was incomparable. So, this is kind of what I'm saying about how the grass is always greener on the other side, that we view our government, which they, should be held to a better standard in a lot of ways. We give it an unrealistic view because we have such an ignorance about other countries, and we see like the qualities. Like, I mean, Zach, on the top of your head, like what? There's like a few countries that had less COVID restrictions, and I'm not referring to like countries that are incapable, like certain African countries that didn't have the infrastructure to have COVID restrictions, but there's only like a few countries that we consider Western countries that had like more open um, overall, like from a federal aspect of the country.
I mean, like, I don't know, like you have to have restrictions, but you also can't
Was
have
that for
everybody.
me?
But you also can't
So
have
I was
everybody
listening to Zach.
abiding.
Okay.
But you can't have everybody abiding by these restrictions,
I
right?
think like I want to say well there was a PSA going around, and I can't remember the country, but I do remember it was very early on in COVID, and she was like in charge of like the public health in this country, and she was like, we haven't really had to close down, and we haven't had to really do anything because we
I think it was like
implemented.
Sweden. I think it was like Sweden or
I
something.
Well, I mean, every state
Yeah,
in
I
this
feel like
country
it
closed
is,
down. So,
and
like, I mean,
it was basically like we've implemented a mask mandate, and basically that's how we've stayed open. And
Right.
I remember looking back at that, and I was like, why don't we do that? So,
Well, I
and then
mean,
we
it's
did, and
just
we're like, this shit doesn't work.
well, no. The problem that we had in this country, and we still have it, and Republicans are guilty of this, is that we can't be honest about anything. We weren't allowed, like we're not allowed to talk honestly about real issues, and we can't talk honestly about what group was the most vulnerable, and that's unhealthy fat people. And if we cared about saving lives, that would have been pushed. And you know, it's a very weird. It was a very weird environment. But talking about things honestly, I think, is kind of the biggest divide. Well, I don't think
well,
either side
I
like.
mean, like, but if you want to be honest about it, like, this is a secular country, so like,
Sorry, I had
well,
food in my mouth. No,
like
I
it's a.
think that is the
Hold on, I
problem,
don't
and
think
it's
she
one
can
of the
hear me. Let me
reasons.
drop
Like I
down.
think.
Hold on, Dre, hold on. Can you not hear Zach speak?
Oh
Can
no,
you
I
not?
can't. I'll drop down so I can hear him.
Okay.
Don't
Zach, you
think
were
we can
saying.
hear Drea, or can you hear
Yeah, no,
me?
I can hear everyone now. But like, this is a secular country, so like, if you're in a workplace and the boss says, "Keep your religion at home," well, then keep your religion at home. Like, I don't really have a problem with any of that. Um, I think like we have to be careful in that regard because like I wouldn't want some Muslims or some Jews or some Hindus rubbing things in someone's face that they don't want to be rubbed in. Just the same
What
way.
you don't want?
Just the
You
same
don't
way.
want
You
some.
know.
You don't want some pay. You don't want some payas being thrown in your eyes when you're trying to concentrate at
Well,
work. Is that what you're
yeah,
saying?
like I mean, like work is work. You know, no one's saying you can't have a tree out in your home. No one's saying you can't hand out candy canes to your neighbors. Like no one's saying that. But at the workplace, they're saying, please keep your faith, religion, and creed to yourself because other people are going to start bitching and they're going to want the same thing, and I can't have a Christmas party, a Hanukkah party, a Diwali party, a Ramadan party. We can't have that. I'm sorry. Like.
Well, then
Yeah, I mean,
the rule should
that's
really
the
be
thing.
no parties, because I
Sure,
refuse to
that's
give
why
up
they
my
call it a
First Amendment
holiday
right to
party.
free speech. And then I mean, like, I don't see how. I mean, ultimately,
But that's not
I'm
free
not
speech,
going into
Dre.
a work like.
Dre, Dre, hold on one second. It's not free speech. If I own a business and I say, I don't want any religion or politics in my business. I want it to be, everybody needs to be nice and it causes conflict. If if you want to bring in your Christmas tree and like, you're right. It's not a free speech thing, but I don't know. Your issue is the unequal application of it, which I understand. But can you at least admit, Dre, that sometimes Republicans will, because they were more offended by, let's just say somebody who wears some other type of religious thing, and then they then come back with like their Christian, religion, which again is dear to them, and they throw it back in their face. In other words, it's kind of just like countering that whole, you know, I guess freedom, but not necessarily being
Again,
equal
like,
in
I
other.
think that comes down to just being a bad Christian. And I feel bad saying that because none of us are perfect. We are all with sin, but I really feel like I'm not offended by other people's religion. Would I love if like everyone was like in a utopia and a similar in the religion as me? Of course I would, because everyone has an imaginary utopia. But I'm not offended by like the Muslim doctor. I'm not offended by my Jewish, captain of my facility. I'm not offended by the atheists that I work with or the agnostic, or I'm not offended by any of it. What I agree with you with is yes, I am offended by the uneven application, because if I have like maybe like the fact that if we have someone who's religious and they're wearing their hijab, I am not going to be told that I can't wear like my crucifix, right? So if there's
Yeah, but in
zero,
what
If
cases can
someone's
you
got
not wear a
a
crucifix?
cross,
Yeah,
so my
Everson.
point being, um if there's like, okay, we can't have religious items because it does, like, I work in a place where realistically, sorry, excuse me, still getting over this cold. I work in a place where technically, really, we aren't supposed to do a whole lot of anything religious, and we aren't supposed to have any political affiliations like publicly, because I work with the government. That being said, because people are, in my experience, it's not like the outside world as much. We're kind to each other. I see these people 40 plus hours a week, so we're kind and understanding and tolerant, and um, we don't, it doesn't offend me to know that, Dr. Cotter is next door doing his prayer. If anything, I'm glad that I live in a country where this man can stop what he's doing and show his faith. However, if or if we're saying there's nothing religious allowed, we have to be careful, because we remember that there are some people who wear their religious attire all the time. And I could maybe put my cross necklace under my shirt so that I don't offend someone. But even then, like, I feel like that's offensive to me. Like, I work really hard to just be tolerant and caring and polite to other people, that I shouldn't have to walk in fear or shame in my religion because of somebody else being um intolerant or
But but
being.
but Dre, let me ask you a question. Like, have you ever in your life experienced a situation where somebody told you to tuck your cross in, or they looked at you and said that's inappropriate?
No,
Like,
I'm also very intimidating in real life. No one would talk to me like that. Like, I sound very
yeah,
sweet,
but
but
nobody would say tuck in your cross, because you could say it's a piece of jewelry. Back off. Like,
well, I
it's
wore a T-shirt once that just said faith on it, and I had one of our mental health supervisors ask me, "Why are you wearing that shirt?" And I looked at her. I was like, "Would you feel comfortable asking me that question if I said, or if this shirt said, my pronouns or something?" Like, I don't.
yeah, but
Ultimately,
okay,
like,
so
in person, no one would have the balls to talk to me like that, because it would just
I
not
get
work
it, but
out.
I would feel it's inappropriate if someone walked in wearing a shirt that said Israel. Like, you shouldn't have any shirt that's like. I get it. It's just like, this is different. Like, your faith is one thing, and I agree with you. Like, I do not want to live in a country where someone feels uncomfortable wearing a cross on their neck. That's crazy. But I,
But I
but I
do think,
feel.
like, anymore, I kind of make a point of it, like, I take my necklace and my jewelry off when I shower, right? So, but I try to remember to put that back on. In particular, shut up, Zag. I saw that. He threw me off.
Are we?
But like,
Okay, just a heads up. I don't know if we're gonna like argue this like kind of culture war thing between Happy Holidays versus Merry Christmas. I just wanted to point out though, it's kind of funny because apparently, not that I lived through it, but like I guess in a prior generation, like Merry Christmas was almost like a secular holiday that Christians would always complain about how commercialized it was. Um, and then now, but I see this kind of cultural shift where it's like I've always lived this cultural shift where Christians are saying, God damn it, just say Merry Christmas instead of Happy Holidays, because we all know like which holiday we're trying to celebrate. I mean, Prager,
Yeah,
who's Jewish, has been saying this, but like, so
yeah.
yeah, it was kind of like, I mean, again, it's like it's this weird thing where we're arguing things, we're turning things into a battleground that just wasn't even thought of as
Yeah,
battlegrounds.
it's not
You
even a
know?
thing. It's like I agree. Like, I mean, as a kid, because I didn't grow up Christian, like, the only thing that would ever make me feel uncomfortable is because I didn't celebrate Christmas. I didn't believe in Santa Claus. So, like, if somebody as like a little boy would be like, "So what? What is Santa Claus going to bring you?" like I'd be like kind of, you know, it was a little uncomfortable. But other than that, like that's just from personal experience. But other than that, like it never bothered me.
Well, you
It
guys
never
have Hanukkah Harry, right?
yeah.
Be sick. You got so it's like that
No, that
South
wasn't
Park
that wasn't around
episode.
back then.
No, it's boxing lived through the South Park episode. It's so sad and lonely to be a Jew on Christmas. He had to live through that, and
Oh, next to my little fucking
with
waspy rich neighbors in Winter Park who got every gift they ever wanted to. My Jewish parents had to
yeah,
like maybe spread it out between 8 days, and then they, you know, didn't get everything. You know what
yeah. No, it was kind of funny. So you were the poor Jew who didn't get the
I mean? No,
8
I wasn't that
days
poor.
of gifts.
Growing up in the 80s, particularly with the first school that I attended, there were many Jewish students there. I mean, 20%, 30%. All of them celebrated Christmas and all of them celebrated Santa and stuff like that. So I think I don't know. What you're described, because I think I might be 10 years older than you or something, or 15, but I don't think we're that different in terms of our ages. And
No, I mean it's like it depends. Like I know plenty of Jewish people that do celebrate like Christmas, like culture. Like you know, we've got like go see Christmas lights, but like in our house, I feel like a Christmas tree kind of is like a Christian. I don't know, but no, we
Oh
didn't
no,
do
so
that.
Christmas, so like Russian Jews in New York, they always get they always get like a Christmas tree in but it was almost like a secular observance, like when they were kind of like it was through like the Soviet system. So like the Russians actually kind of have do the Christmas tree thing too, but they tend to put it up for January, for all of January.
January 7th, yeah.
Yeah. But they still have to be festive and go along since they're in America. And then that like December is the month
Well, Suki,
put
it's
that.
also the so I know a bunch of Jews here who went to sort of secular, even Christian schools, and they would come home, say, where's our Christmas tree? Where's that? Where's this? And occasionally the parents would acquiesce and do it, but more so, what would happen is there wouldn't be a tree. There would just be like a pile of presents in a corner, and they would open them on the 25th. And like then I had some Jewish friends that'd be like, "Oh no, how dare they? They're not real Jews if they participate in gift giving on Christmas, because that's a Christian thing. We don't do
Yeah,
that. Thank you very much.
it's a trivial. Yeah,
We killed Jesus. We're not going to recognize any holidays of his." I mean, this is what they would all say in jest.
whoa,
But then like you look at it and
see Zag with the contra.
they like
that's
didn't do
that's
it.
what they celebrate.
Yeah, they marked the date.
Yeah.
No, but like,
No, I mean,
yeah,
the truth
but
is
if they
that
went to a Christian school, there'd be pressure on the parents to do Christmas. You know?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
we're getting
well, in
into
terms of, I mean, okay, there's like okay, people get the day off. Like, what else you're gonna do? Have dinner with family. Like,
Go out for
okay, there's a
Chinese
sale. There's a
movie. Yeah.
sale throughout this like season.
Go
What
out
are
for
you gonna do? You
Chinese
want to
food.
buy some shit? Give it like make the kids happy. It's always been like this. It's
yeah.
not like but it's like where's the birth of Christ? Like, yeah, in some nativity scene.
Hanukkah. Here's the thing: Hanukkah is not even like a religious. It is, but it's not even that religious significant in Judaism. Whereas Christmas is. So
Yeah.
the importance is small. The only reason it was kind of like changed in a way is just because of you're right of that giving aspect. Because we live in America, so they kind of like acquiesce to that, which there's no problem with it. I guess there's no
They want
problem with
like
that.
like American Jews want to make it have like a more compatible form, I guess, in tune with like how like everyone's got their own, like all the Christians got their thing and they have it all set up. So we got
Right.
like a Hanukkah.
But
It's like kind of around the same time, and they're just doing that. It's that dumb game, but it doesn't matter. It's still like I think people just say Merry Christmas. Christmas songs are fine. It's just like it's like a very Americanized thing too. But that I didn't
well,
even grow up.
it's also a thing that I think Zag was saying it, or somebody was saying it, is that like the culture wars are kind of fought on the peripheries. Like these things aren't really, and I get it. Like ultimately, it is important, keeping your religion and faith. But these things that you see right wingers fight sometimes, yeah, the Bud Light, I get it, was a tipping point. I have no problem with them doing it. But first off, like I mean, Bud Light, I look down upon people who drink that anyway. But
Yeah.
the point is that they fight these battles sometimes that there is significance in the logic of it, but sometimes they're missing I guess the real issue. Like immigration is a big issue, for example. But I don't know, like like the wearing of a cross thing, like Zach mentioned. I don't know. I don't feel that that's like an issue. I don't know.
But I personally like. I don't care about arguing about it too much. I think we were
Go ahead,
talking
Richard.
about.
Hold on, Zuki.
Oh
Wait,
wait,
sorry. I didn't mean to mute that. I just didn't mean to mute. Just go
Yeah,
ahead, Richard.
I mean, one thing that I would point out is that a couple of things. It's already a deeply um, commercialized holiday, Christmas. That is, it's out of control. In fact, and whenever someone talks about like there's a war on Christmas or something like, I really do not know what they are talking about. I mean, you start seeing Christmas decorations like after Halloween and so on. I mean, the amount of gift giving and festivities, this notion that this holiday is under threat, seems totally bizarre. And it just seems this way for conservatives to find something to care about that they can kind of play the victim, but also hammer someone a little bit, to be honest. Because don't you find it also just a little bit delusional, this whole war on Christmas? Because it's like they're basically, there was a time when there was a kind of Protestant assumption about American civic religion. Like Eisenhower never said God bless America at the end of an address. He said good night. And that only came about when that dominant culture was under threat. And it was Anglo-Protestant, but obviously many Catholics took part, Jews took part, Muslims were very rare, etc. But there was a kind of dominant culture. And when that culture is under threat, let's say by immigration, demographics, etc., people kind of react in this delusional way. And I think it is something, in a way like someone who's hysterical would react. So they're like, say Merry Christmas. You must say Merry Christmas. These people hate Christmas and Thanksgiving. They want to take it away. None of this is happening. But they're also kind of like, in making everyone say Merry Christmas, they're like asserting in a passive aggressive way a sort of 1950s white hegemony. Like as if everyone just says Merry Christmas, we'll be like magically transported backwards in time. And I
Richard,
think that's part of it, actually. Yeah.
It's no different than how I felt when there would be, like there's like my brother was in like band and they would like do like a Christmas, a holiday thing, or I think it was called Christmas then or whatever, the play. And they would wear like, normal, it wasn't like they were wearing crosses. They were just probably wearing red or whatever it was, like normal Christmas stuff. And there was this like Jewish girl who, another doctor, family, and they felt like the need to wrap her fucking instrument in like this like Jewish, like the blue and white. It's like, there was nothing Christian. No, I know.
The Israeli colors?
No, just like whatever. I don't know what they were trying to do. No,
okay.
Jewish, I guess, blue. No, it wasn't the Israeli colors. But she wanted to like let everybody know, like, I celebrate Hanukkah. But the play was not even like, and that to me, I always felt that degree of it's just obnoxious. It's distasteful. And I remember I was young when that happened, and my parents were just like uncomfortable with it because it's just, why bring attention to yourself when nobody's really bothering you? And then that's kind of how. But that's an overreaction to it on the other side. And when I see people behave that way, they fall into the trap of saying, well, you're not letting me say Merry Christmas. Like, it's always like random people like that kind of give, ammunition to, that type of thought, right?
Yeah. And like, I'm not well, I guess I'm some sort of cultural Christian or something like this. I'm not going to deny my own like heritage and background, the way it informs my life. But needless to say, my spiritual views are a bit unorthodox. But I mean, if I were a devout Christian, would you want Merry Christmas to be said at Walmart, or not to make it even a class issue, at like Neiman Marcus, where a bunch of rich people go and buy fancy perfume, and wouldn't you? I don't know. From one perspective, at least, wouldn't you want to kind of save this holiday from Christmas? Because Christmas itself, it's very Germanic. I think something that is underappreciated. It's kind of like a German import. It wasn't celebrated as intensely in the past. And then at this point, once Americans got a hold of it, it's just totally commercial. I mean, an interesting add-on here, and then I'll let other people speak. In Japan, there are Christians in Japan, of course, but that's obviously not the dominant culture. They celebrate Christmas like no one's business. They're all of the rituals, the gift giving, etc. And obviously, it kind of demonstrates that Christmas has just become this excuse to max out your credit card, or fun snowmen, stuff. And
before we kind of coined, like, the global homo stuff was coined, and the term was like McDonaldization. Isn't that the term?
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of commercialized, like Americanized type of practice that kind of happens, that like like that kind of the American export of culture, which is very evident that it has happened in Japan. It's happening in Korea as well. So,
Who's the person that said that no two countries that have McDonald's will go to war with each other? Somebody knows that.
Freeman.
That's like a bastardization of like neocon stuff. Like, no,
Yeah,
Somebody said that.
It's like worthless.
democracies have ever.
I mean, it's bullshit, I know, but it's just like a funny.
Yeah.
You're kind of,
Oh wait, someone's got. Man, I'm getting cut off from some, or you guys are getting cut off. I can't really tell.
No two.
Oh, Richard, you're kind of. Can you hear Richard? I can't.
Israeli interesting, isn't it?
Oh my God.
Hopefully, you're getting cut off.
Oh, I could hear you now.
Okay, now we can hear you. Thomas Friedman. He said it, I think.
Oh, okay. I didn't mean to use that for any other reason other than that's what I thought of. Just in general, it's kind of a weird, a promise. I mean, it's
when it comes to Christmas, Richard was mentioning it already. I do think only people from let's say cold countries can actually appreciate, let's say, the Christmas spirit in a certain way. Because it's it's midwinter night, it's like the summer solstice. It's the cold times, when people get together. And what is the Christmas spirit? It's like this notion of sharing, of your own pettiness, and that's important when you're living in an environment where winter is. I mean, winter has lost lots of its. It's I mean, we are modern people. You can always, if you're freezing, you can increase your heating. So it's actually a very scary. It was for thousands of years a very scary time, and so that's a universal kind of spirit, and for Christmas, and it's it fits quite well, nicely together with the spirit of Jesus, so to speak. Like uh, humility, uh, unselfishness, giving instead of taking, celebrating, let's say, what's really important for you. Obviously, that got perverted, I mean, a lot with the whole shopping nonsense. But there's still a lot of this is still around. And
Hey, Kaiser, quick
I
question:
can't,
Have you ever seen the American videos of like the Black Friday? Because it's not as much anymore, but this is like pre like internet as much, pre like Amazon, when you would have like the Walmart crowd like run over each other and fight for jockey for positioning for the first TV.
Yeah,
That's
Jingle All the Way boxing. Remember that movie? Jingle All
yes,
the Way?
yes, yes.
They're fighting over that action figure,
But that's the
Arnold and
thing. I
Sinbad.
mean, this is, I think, one of these unsolved questions of the American soul, of the, let's say, faithful American soul, because I think, and this is that's like my feeling I get, when you're in these places where are more conservatives, let's say Christians. I think many feel that, yeah, I know, yes, freedom, and yes, we love that shit. It's awesome, freedom of speech. And do your own business is also cool. You don't want to become commies. I get that. But the whole capitalism at the end of the day is very, very much it's a destroyer of values. Because what will capitalism do? It will appropriate everything if you can make money out of it. That happened to Christmas, obviously, and that happens to all the other stuff. The let's say environmental protection is not a bad thing in principle. To have to have clean forests or healthy forests and clean rivers. That's a good thing, but it will be appropriated because you can make money out of it. Then it's getting big. Then you get to the level of Greta Thunberg, and then you get the whole thing about ESG, which is then promoted by BlackRock and so forth and so forth. But that's but I do think that we are living in a new kind of era. I think that more and more Americans, in particular, are becoming very much reflective. Honestly, that wasn't the case 20 years ago. And they're self-critical. They're questioning that. That doesn't mean that they will become commies, for sure not. But they will also say, okay, but maybe that capitalism stuff, maybe we over-exaggerated it a little bit, Maybe it's not all about mammon, Maybe it's not, you cannot
People can only
monetize
reflect.
every value.
Here's the thing: people can only make that reflection if they have a certain amount of wealth, right? I mean, this is true because until you have a certain amount of wealth, you realize that, like,
I would say boxing happens already earlier in the spaces, because I think what happened with the internet, and it's the beauty of it, that you cannot stay isolated, and you will sooner or later you will exchange ideas, and you will be confronted with different viewpoints and values, and obviously at first you will have these maybe feelings of rejection, of resentment, cognitive dissonance, but then you will engage with those points. And I've met a lot of conservative Americans who are actually very, very critical of the whole concept of of the end states of capitalism. You can say the whole LGBTQ stuff, rainbow stuff. I mean, that's huge markets out there. The vegan stuff, that's huge markets. Why is it getting so huge? And I do see that people are questioning it. But anyway, that goes way beyond Christmas.
I don't link that.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, Christmas. I do believe. Is there Christmas spirit? Actually, I think there is. And but I think you can really appreciate. I mean, come in the code. I mean, Zagunelli is from Russia. No, he's not from Russia, but he has ancestry in Russia. Also a cold country, and yeah, it does something to you. When the nights are cold. When the winds are howling. I even wrote a little poem here. Let me reiterate it. When the oh God, fuck me. Wait a minute. Guys, wait a second. Give me a second here. I'm getting old. Really, this is unbelievable. I hope I will not get here any kind of.
Hey, get out your readers first. You know what I mean?
Boxing, if you're getting old, sometimes you just have these moments of brain farts. When the cold winds are rising, and no, when the cold winds are rising and the snow is falling, then, my friend, old man winter is calling. And when you are, like, say, in a dark night out there somewhere, and it's freezing cold, you can appreciate it, and then you appreciate the Christmas spirit. And I do think it's a universal spirit. This is why I think even people who are not Christians can appreciate it. Like, there is something to it. Obviously, the credit card stuff, which what Richard mentioned, is also true, absolutely. But there is something to it. I do people like Christmas time in Germany, even though they are maybe not Christians. It's I mean, it's fucking dark all the time. It's like 16 or 17 hours of the day. It's dark, And I'm not even talking about
Kaiser, there's a
Scandinavia.
coziness to it all.
Yeah,
Being
exactly.
around the fireplace, cold outside with family and friends. Yes, it's sort of like a celebration of high winter almost.
And it's humbling you. It's humbling yourself, because you realize, oh fuck, without all the, let's say, coziness of modern civilization, winter is a tough time, and you are alone, you are nothing. Let's say there's this coming together is very important. This is why the Christmas markets are so popular. Like, people enjoy it. They want to come together. It's an inner like an inner need, to not spend Christmas alone. in the dark time, because yeah, it can be depressive if 17 hours of the day are like darkness, and you want to come together, and you realize, and that's the moment when you realize, hey, that human exchange, this is so important, even more important, and then let's say material status. You know what I'm talking about. And winter is this humbling factor. I'm always saying, I mean, I love all the times of the year. I'm always saying you can bullshit your way through summer. Summer is a time of bullshit, flirting, easy going, yada yada yada. But you never can bullshit your way through winter. Winter is the time where you need each other, because you alone, you would freeze to death basically. So not today, because yeah, I get it. We're living in modern times, but this notion is still within us, like this feeling. Yeah, I think that's one of the things why Christmas is so alluring to everyone, even though there might not be Christians. And that's okay. I think that's a good thing. It's a universal human thing, Why not? Why let
Well,
them
we
celebrate?
have that secular aspect over here with, like, I would say, like, that's like Thanksgiving. In other words, like, getting together with families type of thing. That's kind of what it is. Essentially, obviously, there's, like, but then I think that's like kind of our secular version of that over here. It's always, it's important to every American to try to get to dinner or having Thanksgiving. That's always like been a great thing in American, culture. And I do agree, like, yeah, Christmas in itself is pretty. Like, the Christmas lights are pretty. All these things are good, and but let me just go back to kind of a previous thing that Richard said, is that, you know, given that the culture is of such, like, I don't. There's like this whole notion of how people they say that American is, it's not a Christian nation, it's this and that, and I have no problem with saying that the origins of America, or even American itself, is a Christian based nation. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you're like Jewish, for example, that you're forced to convert or wear a cross. It's just kind of like the overwhelming, I guess, society as a whole. um that's what it's based off of. Yeah, you could say it's based off of like Judeo-Christian principles, but at the end of the day, like, the majority of people that started America were Christian. So it's not very controversial to say that. But I think that a lot of people are afraid of that because they want their ability to be able to freely practice their own religion, but that doesn't mean indoctrinate other religion upon other people's. And that's kind of where we get to, like, where we are today, where people are, they fear, you know because now we see, like, kind of like this. A lot of people have this they want to, they almost want like this, like, feudal, or I see a lot of people say they're talking about like a feudalistic Christo nation, which is not kind of what it used to be, but they kind of want that view because they feel that we've gone so far away from it, from our traditional values, that's the kind of how they feel that's the only way to, like, change course of where certain, I hate to use the term, but wokeness is gone, right?
Well, see, I think a
Always
lot of
remember,
the war on Christmas, I gotta tell you, I think a lot of that is more of a pushback to the woke stuff, where I don't think it's anything. I'm not Christian, but I love the whole like war on Christmas narrative just because it's more about like, no, I'm allowed to be religious in America. That's where I think more of the heart of that whole dialogue, I guess you would call it, has to do with. But I think that's more of what it is versus the, um, I guess just what the conversation's been about.
Right, right.
boxing, never forget one thing: the whole woke stuff. End of the day, I mean, if you like them, hate them, and certainly I think most of that stuff is really, excuse the language, retarded. But never forget, it's, I mean, at the end of the day, it's an ivory tower. Okay, it's an ivory tower. Yes, it will, let's say, seek its way through, let's say, to the normal populace, to a certain degree, but it's never. The thing is, look, I'm from the GDR, okay, and the thing is, what and you can say, oh, let's say the socialist countries always had a problem, and they had a problem certainly with the churches, the Christian institutions, and they were, let's say, when you go back to the time of the Russian Revolution, like Trotsky and all that stuff, they wanted to get rid, or even, let's say, took the French revolutionaries who wanted to rename every kind of day of the month and every day of the week, and to totally secularize society. Like, they were really hardcore. I mean, even more, way more hardcore than later on Bolsheviks in Soviet Russia. But the thing is, it will never ever, it cannot, it's very artificial to a certain degree because you cannot get rid of thousands of years of, I would say, genetic memory, and there will be a backlash, and you're seeing that. So if so, I don't say that it's just a fashion, this wokeness what you see right now, but to a certain degree it is a fashion because the backlash
Well,
is already happening
okay.
to a certain degree.
Do you guys not agree with me here? The Christmas is just dramatically overrated, overestimated, I should say.
Oh, totally.
I mean, and the
100%.
notion that like even wokeness is necessarily anti-Christian. I mean, I can see that to some degree, but I think they're mostly just anti-Trump supporter, and you know that comes first. But I mean, Christmas has
Oh, I'd say
expanded.
it's anti-white too.
Yeah, that's fair.
It is anti-white.
And to the degree that Christianity, particularly as it's expressed in America and the West, it's a white thing. So, but it seems to be kind of secondary. But I don't think that aspect of wokeness is winning. I mean, I mean, in my experience, Christmas is more intense now than it was when I was a boy. And so conservatives trotting out this, you know, war on Christmas, I'm just like, what are you talking about?
I'm telling you, Richard, it is totally just a way to troll feminists.
Troll feminist?
I know it sounds like I'm telling you.
I wouldn't say it's
Merry
feminist,
Christmas,
no.
woman.
But it is. When I say feminist, I'm talking about the people that go out and protest. We all know who I'm talking about. That is the feminists. We all know what I'm talking about. That I'm telling you,
that sounds very incel-like. Don't make it an incel stuff here, please, man.
It's not. I'm just saying how it is.
That is incel logic. Like, oh, the feminists.
No, I don't think so. I don't think that is. I think that's just talking about reality.
Hold on. But it's also.
I don't mean that in any negative way. I'm not starting
I get it.
I'm just saying the reality I see on the ground.
Hold on. So let me just say one thing that I find it very unproductive sometimes. I'm not saying you, but just in general. When, they make this whole symposium about like how this like black family has this black Santa Claus, and then they spend so much time and they go, Saint Nicholas is white. And it's like such a stupid, like, I get it, sure. But like, it's a very weird focus when there's so many bigger issues. And you're right. It's like and listen, it's tough for me to say there's not, because I am not Christian, so I don't want to like feel like if a Christian feels that way, like sure, like I understand that they feel like there's a war on Christmas, but I'd say overall, like Christmas as a whole, I don't know. I mean, it's not, and you see people they'll say like, well, this person said Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, and I said Merry Christmas back to you, and then you'll see like a million people like clap and like and celebrate. Like it's like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
I want to ask a question really quick before we shift, just because I've been in here for a minute. And I mean, I'm 24 now, and a lot of you guys are a lot older. And I feel like part of what formerly was the joyous part about this time of year for me, like as a child, was almost like because we didn't think about it. Like we just enjoyed it. It was like we're around family and friends, and we're not aware, or we're not having these kind of cultural debates. And I mean, for me now, it's like I'm not really looking forward to Christmas because I have to have, like, my family's broken up to a large degree, and it's going to be sort of compelled attendance for something that would be pretty uncomfortable compared to what it used to be. And I feel like as where I am now, it's like I have to muster up so much like investment to do something to get less of an effect as like the same feeling of coziness and togetherness that I did when I was a child. So I'm just so disengaged and disenfranchised from it at this point. I don't know if you guys have experienced the same thing, but anyway.
Well, part of that's growing up, which I understand. It's tough moving away from home, I guess, but that is something that I agree with you in the sense that, taking things for granted. Like, I mean, I didn't, but it's, yeah, that is someone else, I guess, go ahead. It's a little abstract for me.
Yeah, it was just like that time of year, and like that good, and there wasn't like a big, okay, we need to define all of this. And there's some idealism of childhood, obviously, but now it's just with the way things have just changed. I just don't like. I just like. I don't even want to almost hear the discourse on it. I mean, I'm in this space because you guys think kind of the same way, and it's refreshing. But I feel like everything is so like there's so much buy-in, or you don't even really know what you're celebrating anymore. I don't know. It's just kind of a confusing time, I guess.
Well, don't you feel that like this is kind of what we've talked about this before? Like, I mean, this is kind of like how a lot of people view as like, I hate to say it, like the trad movement. In other words, like they make like this like artificial view of like a traditional wife, and like, but then it's like I think it's all steeped in like the pornography aspect of it, because like she always has like ample bosoms and like you know what I mean, and then she's like cleaning and she's wearing like a what is it, like a French maid outfit, and then like so then they're pursuing to this. It's like we like make like cartoonish versions of like things that like we like strive to be, rather than having like a real grip on reality. I don't know.
I'm just like, I'm already sick of the word trad.
I hate
It's
that
just
word.
like,
Yeah.
because no one's like, well, it's funny because like the e-girls are still trad wife post, definitely. But they just don't, but like in terms of like this self-identification of being a trad, I mean, I'm pretty sure this is all done. Like it's been dead for a while since maybe it had that weird gap within like 2017. Yeah, got people were still calling themselves trad or whatever, but then it soon became like this red flag for e-girls, like of what they really were. And it's like, okay, you're just some ran through trick from dating apps, and now you're here on Twitter and just like doing all this shit, and then like saying, posting like Bible verses or whatever, and now you're here.
Well, I
So
mean, the thing is that I never even paid attention to it for a very long time, because I wasn't really on like Twitter other than like for boxing stuff, for like honestly all through medical school, and through the beginning of residency when my hours are crazy, and then I like turned on, like I paid attention to it, and I was like a little confused about like where the culture went. Like it accelerated so fast in a lot of different ways, and it is something I'm still trying to grip my head around, a lot of the differences about how the technologies change people's perception. I think that's honestly why a lot of like kind of like where my initial thoughts were about like other countries, like the grass being greener, because again, like you see these other countries, people who've never been there and experienced it, countries, through a lens of the internet, through the lens of social media, through the lens of propaganda often. And then that's kind of the way a lot of people who don't have like spend a lot of time like reading historical context and history, and having any type of discipline, they look at history, they look at only one side. Like, I mean, somebody said like in a space I had the other day about how well, women, back in the day where people like were infant mortality rate was, people were more chaste. In other words, people's sexual behavior was more. I'm like, do you want to go back to the time where you weren't able to perform a cesarean section? I mean, do you really want that? You don't view like any positive medical development. So it's a very weird kind of like view that some people have about like traditional things. So I don't know. Go ahead, Daisy. Or Jonathan, whoever.
I think that the cling on to the trad thing is you're right about like when it comes to the medical advancements and whatnot. I think some people would legitimately be willing to give up those types of things. Me to an extent, like to have those kind of traditional values. Although I do completely agree that generally people who say like call themselves trad, that is kind of like a LARPy thing. I before I was like um, before I was acclimated into internet culture, I didn't know that, and I did that for maybe like a week.
oh yeah, it became like an immediate red flag. Even so, the smarter e-girls would be like, "Oh my god, it's just like the male It's basically like the girl version of like a male feminist." And it's like, well, now we all know you're a sex pest, dude. Good
Yeah, when
job.
I
So
first
they can't.
started like just kind of creeping around this part of the internet and like discovering it, like I didn't understand what it was. And no, you're completely right. Generally, like accounts that have like trad in their name, it's like it's iffy.
Well, I mean,
Well,
the
they
thing
don't.
is that young men, I think, they have the same mentality, the mindset of like, internet, like, seeking out. And I don't know if this is all young men, but these are young men who I see like habitually on the internet. and then they will see, and I guess it's like a much larger percentage. And if their politics like kind of align with the rights, they're seeking the same type of, I guess, female, whatever it is, from one side versus the other. And I don't see how it's like, it's just a weird, like, but again, I think this is kind of where people, um, again, they kind of like, they view everything through a filter. And like, I've said this before, like, I think filters, like filters usage for women, I think is more damaging than even pornography in itself, because it gives us these people this unrealistic view of humanity and women. And I think then ultimately they become like, they have an unrealistic view of themselves. And then a girl that they may be equally attracted, like, I think people of like kind of equal looks should kind of like get together. Like, I think everybody agrees with that, even if it's not said. And then, they end up not realizing that the person down the street that they may view as ugly because she doesn't look like the internet girl, may turn out perfectly. So that's like a huge issue, actually.
I haven't heard this term before. So trad is what people are saying.
Oh no,
Yeah.
not anymore. I mean, the people that label is dropped quickly.
Yeah. If you call yourself trad, it's cringe. It's like,
yeah, but no one, like none of the girls.
Is it like referring to yourself, or is it referring to like the
trad
woman that you want, or like
traditionalist, like whatever? It's just, it's done, it's over. But the e-girls definitely still do like trad post here.
there's some.
And
Yeah,
they do the trad wife posting. They like post their meals, post their like stuff, know. And
what about the traditional stuff do you guys not like though? Because I'm curious. Because like I still like, I'm more religious, which I'm not saying like, okay, I need someone to be like. I guess there's a line with it though, right?
What do you mean by traditional? Like, I'd say one thing else that like the Republicans.
Like, I don't want to date like an OnlyFans person.
Okay, no, I'm not saying that. No,
right?
no,
I mean, like,
generally, if a girl has like trad in her name, that would, like, I guess that what the most optimistic way of putting it would be to, it would be a woman who aspires to find a man who she can cook for, who can basically the homesteading, stay home type thing. But from what I have seen, also, as this other guy pointed out, is that generally the people that still to this day have it after all this time, have it in their names, don't tend, they're like not the type of people that would be doing that.
Okay, so
I don't think
anyone
has it on their like bio or anything like that. It's just
let's
that.
not focus. Let's get over this. I don't want to talk about this track. No, but I'll tell you another thing that kind of bothers me that like Republicans have historically done, and because it's gone too over far, is like the way that like, and I guess this kind of started almost with like the Rush Limbaugh crowd, where they were like, oh, the environment, it's liberal. It's like, I don't understand that, like, having a clean environment, like, and I understand that we use it in a way that is ridiculous, but like the weird views, like specific view of like nature and not being great. And I know there's plenty of conservatives that like hunt and love nature and hike, but there's like this like weird view, and there's this other weird view too of like art. In other words, like there's nothing like liberal about like the classical arts. Like I love going to art museums. Like I don't love certain abstract arts, but like fine European art is like beautiful, of like all different cultures. And like sometimes the dismissal of that, I find there's nothing liberal about it. It's just it's part of humanity.
Yeah, it's pretty much this like conservative view that, oh, we need kids to go to college and to only do specific like trades or go into lawyer. And then also that same thing on the economy front. They're like, we just need lower taxes and guns and we'll be fine effectively. And that's obviously not what conservatism is. So like that's right. I think that's where it comes from a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I like art. Like I love art. I like, I'm a appreciator of art, and I get it. Like not all art is like, and it's also like this other thing where they view any type of like culture thing that may be more liberal. Like I don't know. Like I feel like people overestimate or over exaggerate the effect like a liberal movie will have on like their like mindset. Like I watch plenty of like liberal things. I listen to plenty of like liberal music. It's not going to change my political views. I think it's just kind of like just a healthy understanding of like other types of thought and just art. I mean, conservatives suck at art. They suck at movies. They suck at music. Just it is what it is. Like I'm sure there's a few, but I wish there were. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's been kind of, well, that's the thing with like the whole Baptist sphere Baptister guys, Bronze Age pervert type of uh, section of the faction of the political right is just that they want to make sure that there's like there's definitely a celebration. There should be like a cultural vanguard in terms of all that. I agree with him, but like a lot of it just feels like very shoehorned. Although I think the internet culture really has changed that with kind of like, right wingers do dominate the meme culture, which is good. But the joke is, it's like, the left can't meme, but they can just meme things into laws. So that they, you know what I mean, like that, and that's what they're doing. Um, so again, it's also just a slow process of like, well, I mean, it's also kind of giving in because it's saying, yeah, I mean, there's to be a conservative really, or to be non-leftist, that more accurately, it's actually easier than ever, but it's also like institutionally, it's because well, we're kind of against the overculture ultimately, right? So it's easy, like, you know what I mean, like at this point, people are just going to call you a Nazi for saying, like, I don't think kids should be given like hormone blockers to have, because they don't recognize their gender or anything like that. This is going to be like, again, we're fighting over like already like lost territory. So that's the problem. But it's like, but people aren't patient. They don't realize, like, to kind of swing this like overculture or like push the overculture back, it's going to take a long time. It's not going to be just that immediate.
I guess that's why, like, I get in the argument. It's where people they obsess about like trans women in sports, which I think everybody agrees it's unfair for sure. But ultimately, the bigger question is, and the more important question is like, why are we enabling that type of thinking in itself, right? So, in other words, like, you see a lot of like, Republican politicians, for example, say that, like, I think it was like Chris Christie, he's like, well, parents should have the right to do with what their kids, and blah 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 blah, which I guess, but ultimately the real question is that, is the concept of the transgender identity. But Republicans definitely focus on the sports issue, but maybe they argue that's specifically the issue that more people than not could get on board with. So you're chipping away at the problem in itself, at least, right, to then have like a bigger goal. But I don't know, I mean, I find that's kind of a funny one. But I got to post this in the jumbotron just before I have to end this in a second. Is that there's like this boxer, Clarissa Shields, and she is the best female boxer of all time, and she would like talk about how she would beat a bunch of like male fighters and like knocking all of them out. This is like not really related to the topic, but I just thought it was real funny. And she was sparring this, I think he's like a Russian, some like Russian journeyman fighter, and yeah, she got put on her ass like pretty badly. But again, it's not even a big. It's just like a funny thing.
But it's the science has already been settled,
Just,
but there's like these policies that are being pushed. No.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Daisy. I got to end this after you go.
I think it's from a quote unquote trad perspective. I do think that this could end well for certain people in certain factions of the right that don't want to see women in sports. I say let's let these trans women dominate sports. That way we never have to worry about our little girls going into sports again.
Yeah, but that's not a good idea. I mean, I have no problem with women's sports.
I'm half joking.
Yeah, but I get you. But I know where you're coming from. I mean, this is the thing. This is the same problems the Jacobites had, after the French Revolution. You, even it doesn't matter. I mean, even if, let's say, assume, okay, you start out with good intentions, okay, and you can say, we want to get rid of this absolutistic, retarded, degenerated king here, Louis XVI, whatsoever. You still create your own monster, because the problem is most people don't know when to stop. And the Jacobites created their own monster, and we have created our own monster. And now we have the problem that now we have. Must imagine, women were fighting for their, let's say, the right to participate in sports, Olympics for decades, almost centuries. You can make a case, and now you have to stay silent because it comes to dude, let's say a 6 feet 3 inch dude with a wig on the head and pretends to be a woman, and you have to stay silent because hey, because the dude said so. The dude is now a she. No doctor needed, no psychologist needed, no psychiatrist needed. Just say what you want to be, and then this is what you are. And you have to stay silent, and you have to let him compete, or that person compete in your sports. And obviously, you have no chance winning anymore because if you don't do that, you are basically a racist, xenophobic, Nazi, Jew hater, so to speak. And that's exactly the problem.
Oh, you didn't have to throw that last part in.
But I mean, we have to get the whole
I
royal
know.
flash boxing.
I'm messing with you. I'm messing with
It's
you.
important. The whole royal flash, and that's exactly the wokeism. Let's say how it is so perverted right now. It has created their own monsters, and
Yeah.
it will
But
die.
Kaiser, there's certain people, and I didn't even say that specifically, Daisy, but there's certain people in America that think that for some reason, like women in sports, like makes them more masculine. Like they believe this, and in other words, it leads to, I guess, breaking down the family structure. I mean, this would be the logic behind the people who are against women's sports, right? Again, I don't feel that way. I think that women's sports
Yeah,
are it's
I
good.
think let it play as Daisy Stormer or Daily Stormer. Daisy Stormer is pointing out. Let it play out right now. It is hilarious to watch because it will destroy itself. This monster will eat itself. It is starting to eat itself because if you go into because everything which is completely retarded, which is completely bonkers, and there's not the first time in human history that we are in those times, guys and girls. I mean, it happens every 150 years. There's some craze going around, and afterwards you laugh about that. Thinking, hey, how stupid were these people? But yeah, it happened. I mean, I just out of my head, the iconoclasm, the beef and almost civil war in old Eastern Rome about icons, the iconic pictures, and from our perspective, totally retarded, but it was a huge thing, back then, and they killed each other, they destroyed each other, and it's the same right now here. So,
Well,
yeah,
I mean, it's
but
the same thing, kind of like, and I'm not even like commenting specifically on like, I don't want to get into the whole issue, but like, the concept of like DEI in like universities, right? Like it gets there's pushback when it comes to like a specific group that happened and the whole situation happened, and maybe like ultimately, hopefully that eats itself up. In other words, like we realize that like that way of thinking, that mindset of not having more open free speech and having more merit based qualifications for just in general in education, because like you see people like on the left, like there was like this CNN guy, Fareed Zakara. He's a liberal, but I think he's a doctor or something like that. He's a very smart man, even if he's like a liberal. And he was mentioning that, and I mean, he was literally like 10 years behind, but this was like uncharted territory for them to talk about this. That having people in positions based on diversity, equity, inclusion, having topics specifically based on that, rather than not building something and building greatness and structure. And that doesn't dismiss arts and other things like that, but to not have a purpose in what you're being taught and educated, I find it's a it's like we're living in a mediocrity. It's a mediocre society, and maybe that's going to be a byproduct of it, because eventually, like like Kaiser, like you say, like it eats its own, like that type of thing. You let it play out in a way, right?
yeah, it will destroy itself. It's like it always happens. Sometimes, I mean, look, it's not that complicated. It's in our human nature to from time to time totally go overboard. Like we have this in us, let's say most of the times most human beings are quite well balanced, have a good feeling about what is right and what is wrong, and that is almost stable across the centuries and the millennia. Not much change. I mean, if you look at the 10 commandments, of Moses, yeah, good commandments, man. Like, well, why not? Basically, yeah, can agree with that. You see, um, but sometimes we go overboard, and it happens. and then we go fully crazy, and then obviously there's this group pressure involved. Okay, we want to be holier than thou. Everyone wants. Then it's becoming performative, and then it reaches a point where reality beats satire, where reality is more crazy than any satire ever can be, or any parody ever can be. And that's the moment when the snake will eat itself. And we are close. We are very close. We are closely reaching that point in time again, And as one of those things is, the whole transsexual stuff. Because again, it was 20, 30 years ago, that was a medical issue. Let's say this whole concept of feeling wrong in one's body.
Yeah, it was body
Body
dysmorphia.
dysmorphia.
Yeah, that was a psychological thing. Let's say a medical thing. Then it became, now it's a self-identity thing. So all these laws are basically, you can identify whatever you want, because who are those other people to tell you what you are? Yeah, let them play this out, and then you will see how stupid that is. Because and especially then when because imagine this boxing. If, let's say, an average football player, I'm talking about what you guys call soccer, if the average football player, maybe amateur level, sixth, seventh, eighth level, so really, really low, and said, hey, you know what? I can make a lot of money. I will identify as a woman. I will put on a wig, and I will through my way into the professional women soccer sport. This person would be the best player of all times, And then you will see, but what will be the reaction? I mean, no women.
Yeah, it's cruel. No, it's cruel
Yeah,
to other. I think it's cruel to women. Yeah, I
but
mean,
this is those women must feel it. Some of these, look at Megan Rapinoe. Imagine her. What would be her feelings then? But you
yeah,
see,
but
that's the
she's
thing.
it's bullshit from her, because she's already she was adored towards the end of her career. She didn't have to grow up ever competing against men. She's older than me. She made a lot of money with the woke shit, so she keeps having to go with that. Young women, she doesn't have to deal with that shit. So she's reaping the benefits. It's almost like there was that actress. What is his name? Jeffrey Tambor. He played like this. I forgot this role. It was this played a transgender, and then he was like, well, let this be the last time that a cis male plays a transgender. It's like, motherfucker, you like, the only reason people are like celebrating this is because you were in the show and you did a great job and you made money, so then the next person can't do it. Like, you're benefiting off of that
Exactly,
shit.
but boxing. Believe me. These people will be called out on the hypocrisy. It's already starting. Man. Have a little bit of faith here, boxing. You're a little
No,
bit.
I do. But let me ask Carolina two of the questions earlier that we discussed, and then I'll go back to Daisy, and I got to end this soon. But so, Caroline, we were talking a little bit, I guess. Do you think that the war on Christmas is exaggerated by right wingers in America?
The war on Christmas. There's a war on Christmas.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's what,
I've
like,
been out to
you'll
sea.
see like on.
What's this war on Christmas?
That's right. So you'll see on like Fox News, like in like red letters across the with blood, war on Christmas. You know what exactly what I'm talking about, right?
What, like people are just against Christmas? No, you're gonna have to tell me. I'm sorry, I haven't been keeping up
All
with
right,
that.
never mind. No, I mean, there's just you weren't in the conversation earlier. It's kind of the context matters, in other words. But I'll go back to Daisy. Oh,
You had another question. What was it?
oh yeah, hold on. Yeah. So the other thing is that I guess overall, kind of like the way that I kind of like started this space, and my overall view is like kind of how there's this like view in which a lot of like I guess liberals or leftists or whatever, I think overall the way that the disdain to America, so they view other countries through like a lens, right? In other words, they see like they see what's on the internet, they see the qualities of it without having to live it on. So they see propaganda, and I think a lot of people on the right they view a different time in America, which there are good things about it for sure, but they view it through a modern lens. In other words, they pick apart the good things, and the context doesn't matter, like the conceptualization. Like something that I brought up earlier was like talking about how like somebody said that you may have been in this space, but where women were more sexually selective and had less sex because infant mortality rate was higher. So in other words, like going back to a time before cesarean sections were viable. I
And
think it's
women
a
died
time
in
in which,
childbirth.
yeah. So I don't think that's a time that anybody here specifically wants to go back to. I know Daisy said that she, would give up certain things. I don't know about that one specifically. That's a little. I don't think she would go that far. But there's other time, like not having penicillin for syphilis, for example. You know what I mean? Like, things like that and other things. But do you think that assessment is something you see, Caroline, or because a lot of people.
The assessment that what, like, people want to go back to those times? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they like romanticize times in the past, and they look at other countries through a lens of kind of through a filtered lens and a lens of
I
this.
don't think the average person wants to go back to times before modern medicine, if that's what you're asking. But I think that there are some people that are radical that think that by bringing people back to a certain time, they will behave a different way. But I don't think that that's a way to change people's behavior.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of how I feel a lot about it. And there are things in the past that I do find, better in a lot of ways. A lot of the way that progressivism went, the way that godlessness went, I think is kind of something that we have to shift, back to. But Daisy, I'll let you go ahead, and then I have to finish this space. So you have your hand up, Daisy.
Well, I mean, that just put like three different things in my head because I was
No, you don't need to
initially
answer. That
raising
was
my
just like
hand for the transgenderism, but then you went on and said that the space was
yeah.
mostly about the
Go back to the
Christmas, the
transgender
war
thing.
on Christmas thing. Is that okay? Well,
No,
with
it
the
was like a
transgender
little
thing, I
thing
was
that
just
we.
gonna say. Sorry,
Yeah, it
what?
was a little thing that we just touched upon earlier, just like in a little bit, like I don't know. But just go back to the transgender thing. We don't need to go back to the war on Christmas.
Oh well, that or hey, I have feelings on the progressivism, which I do think is like the issue that has caused all of these types of things, even the desire which some would say is radical to want to go back to like pre-med. I think that there is a way to balance getting that getting us back to a place where we did live more like we did post-modern times, like pre-modern medicine, without having to go back to that. But it requires so much. Progressivism is the root cause of moral progressivism. Is the and just degeneracy and godlessness as a whole being accepted. That I think that kind of like tears us away from the ability to move forward with things like modern medicine and modern conveniences, when I think we could hypothetically have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and I'm not someone who dismisses, like, you see a lot of like, you know, you see a lot of like liberals like dismiss like people that believe in God historically that created great things, even in like what we consider like in modern science and the arts. And that's not true. Like there's many examples of people that were religious that were able to, progress society in the most positive ways in the science and mathematics, historically speaking. It's only recently that it's kind of been that divide's kind of been more wide, in other words. But yeah, I gotta close this space, but yeah, you guys have a good night.
I appreciate
And
you bringing me up. Thank you.
of course, of course. And Kazu, that was a wonderful poem earlier. I shed one tear.
Should we end this saying Merry Christmas?
Yes, Merry Christmas to everybody. Okay.
Happy Hanukkah.